What Ike Allen and Andy Anderson have created at Avaya is what the world needs.
Hello, Avaya family. I'm Brielle Starr, online event coordinator for Avaya. Avaya is the creator of over 1,000 books, films, courses, teachings, and other supportive resources. Thank you so much for joining us. Our fellow teacher, Diane Metcalf, is with us today to talk about healing the effects of childhood trauma from narcissistic mothers. Diane Metcalf is an experienced advocate and author specializing in dysfunctional family dynamics. Drawing from her personal healing journey from narcissistic, physical, and emotional abuse, she developed effective recovery tools that she happily shares with others seeking growth in their own recovery. She is well versed in topics such as narcissism, family dysfunction, abuse, and relationship warning signs. Welcome to Avaya, Diane.
Thank you so much for having me, Brielle.
So glad to talk to you today. Would you be open to sharing with us a little bit about your personal journey to get us started?
Oh, of course. And thank you for inviting me. I'm excited to be here. So my personal journey began, I would say, mid-20s, in my mid-20s to late 20s, somewhere maybe around 26 or 27. I had graduated college. I had moved out of the house. I was living my life and doing my thing and independent. And everything was going well for a while until it wasn't. I started noticing that I had some challenges and I didn't understand where they came from or what it was about. I can give you a couple examples that I felt like maybe I needed to seek some therapy, just get some help. I didn't know who to talk to or how to really resolve these things. One of the first things I noticed was that I did not have the self-confidence and the self-esteem that my colleagues and my peers had. I wasn't going for the positions that I was qualified for. I was just kind of afraid of authority figures, kind of hung back, just didn't believe in myself. I had a lot of self-doubt. And I really didn't have a sense of self, I came to find out. I didn't know myself very well, not the way my peers did. And so I thought, well, what's going on with that? I want to have what they have. And so I need some help figuring this out. And the other reason, or one of the other reasons I sought therapy was that my relationships, my romantic relationships, weren't going very well. One after the other, I was involved with people who were addicted to one substance or another, or were emotionally unavailable, or just didn't treat me well, mistreated me. Some were actually emotionally and physically abusive. So I knew I didn't want to continue living that way. So I sought some treatment. And that treatment wasn't one and done. It's something that continued over the years and actually through the decades, to be honest with you, because as I peeled the onion and talked about certain experiences and got certain things resolved and started healing those things, then other things pop up, as they often do. And so it just became kind of a lifelong thing for me to seek out some kind of either a therapist or self-help or support group or 12-step program, just anything to keep me moving forward and evolving in a healthy, positive way.
Thank you for being open to sharing your story with us, and thank you for doing the work you do today. Let's hop right into the conversation. I was wondering what some common relationship dynamics between a narcissistic mother and her daughter may be.
There's so much there. Where to begin? Well, one of the things you may notice, and I've noticed, and maybe other people in the audience will notice, is there's a sense of one-upmanship. It's kind of a competitive relationship, and anything that we do, any award that we win, any accomplishment, our mom has already done it, and she's done it better. And she will advise us on things she knows nothing about, and she will expect us to take that advice. And if we don't, she'll be offended and get angry, and there could be ugly consequences. Twisting our words, misunderstanding, intentionally misunderstanding. And the thing about that is about stirring up drama. Drama is exciting. It's adrenaline provoking. And it's a form of narcissistic supply is what she's looking for. She's pushing buttons to get that emotional response. I have to say, many of us, when we first start learning about narcissism and narcissistic supply, we learn that it is the supply is it's the affirmation and the praise and the compliments, all of those things that narcissists require and really love. And it is those things. But narcissistic supply can also be happy emotions, our emotions, like if she says something or does something and we respond happily, that's narcissistic supply. And also the reverse is true. If she says hurtful things and we are sad, we are feeling pain and we cry, that is also narcissistic supply. So the big thing that I always talk about is learning to detach and not provide the narcissistic supply. So those are some of the dynamics. So whatever you can do to minimize the drama and not provide the narcissistic supply is a good first step.
Thank you for sharing about those good basics to keep in mind when dealing with that situation. How do narcissistic mothers affect their daughter's self-esteem?
Well, and I don't know if you can identify with this, but I remember never being able to please her, like feeling nothing I did was ever good enough, no matter what it was and how much of myself I put into it, giving my absolute best, it still fell flat. There was still never any recognition for it, or there was minimal recognition or praise. I mean, we all need affirmation. We all need validation. That is just not going to come from a narcissistic mother. She's really going to withhold that. And sometimes it is because she wants to withhold it. She doesn't want to give it. And sometimes I believe that she's just not capable. Like she misses the cues for giving those things to us. So we walk around feeling not good enough and kind of like we're always chasing her love and affection, and it's always withheld. It's within reach, but we never seem to get it. And what we do get is crumbs of affection. And it's not a happy way to live. It doesn't feel good. And we end up spending too much time focusing on her, trying to please her, trying to get that not only validation, but we want her to see us for ourselves. She doesn't do that. She doesn't hear what we say. She continually tries to force us into a mold that we will never fit. And the sad thing is, many of us will try to fit, and we will cut off pieces of ourselves to fit. And that is where the codependency begins. We start focusing on her, people pleasing. It becomes codependency, which I describe as people pleasing on steroids. And so we get this externally focused viewpoint where we're constantly focusing on how to please her or how to get her to recognize us, see us, know us, love us. And, we're just seeking a really good mom and daughter relationship. We all want that. We want that loving, soul bond connection. And unfortunately, and I'm just going to say it, with a narcissistic mom, we're not going to have that. And that's a big part of healing, is that acceptance, accepting the fact that narcissists cannot do that. They're not built for that. They don't have the equipment to bond with us in that deep way that we see other women and their daughters, bonding. I can remember just really wanting to go out for coffee. Very simple thing, just go to Starbucks or something with my mother and have it feel light and free and happy and enjoy each other and laugh. And you know what? It just couldn't happen. She wasn't capable of that kind of connection. So I mourned that loss. And I know I'm jumping way ahead here, but when we recognize the narcissistic traits and we see how they are affecting us and our lives and our decisions, that's when we realize we have been in an abusive relationship. And the word abuse is full of shame, and no one wants to admit or even think that their mother is abusive. So that's one hurdle that we all have to really get over, is to call it what it is. And so once you accept that fact, you can start moving on. You can start accepting that narcissists don't change. They're very predictable. And here's where the power is. You can now start making your interactions feel better, feel safer for you by setting boundaries and doing some other things, because you can't change her. You can only change yourself and how you react. So that's what you have to learn to do.
You made so many great points throughout that, and I can relate to so many of the things you said, especially what you mentioned about getting breadcrumbs of affection. And I see how my mother would occasionally give me that affection, and it was enough to keep me thinking that maybe there was a way to reach more or getting frequent affection, and it was just always breadcrumbs. It was never enough. I was
Right.
starving in a sense.
Right. Exactly. I totally identify with that. And,
Hmm.
when you get those little crumbs and you think there's hope, and then you start, I think, at least for me, doing more of the people pleasing and the twisting ourselves into a pretzel and jumping through hoops and whatever it took. But what we were doing was actually earning that love and affection, and children shouldn't have to do anything to earn love and affection. And we shouldn't have to change ourselves or become somebody different to feel love from our parent. So this is another aspect of healing. It's healing involves coming to terms with a lot of hurtful truths.
Yeah.
And that's what makes the healing process, I think, painful, and many of us avoid it for a long time because it's not a fun time.
Yeah, no, it's hard to look at those things, and it's easy to just not want to look at those things and try to find a different way around healing, but you have to go through it.
Yes, absolutely. I've read that in several places. Several therapists say, the only way to achieve healing is to really move through the process of grieving. The grief process is where it starts. And you can't grieve something until you acknowledge that you've lost something. And we've lost a lot of things. We've lost the mother-daughter relationship or the mother-son relationship that we've always wanted. And when you accept the fact that it's not going to happen, that's another loss. And so a lot of times I think what we're actually grieving is, we're not grieving what we had. We're grieving for what we could have had and that we won't have.
Yeah, I connect to that a lot, and I bet our audience does too. It's hard to think about or see, like you mentioned in public, a healthy mother-daughter relationship and realize you're never going to have that, at least with your biological mother.
Yes, I remember feeling jealousy a lot of times when
Hmm.
I would see mothers and daughters shopping, and they just seemed to be really into each other and loving it and having a good time. And I would just automatically feel jealousy and why can't I have that? And of course, that was before healing took place. So I thought it was something lacking within myself that I had to fix in order for my mother to love me. But through the healing process and through some therapy, I've learned that it's not me. It's her. The problem is her thinking and her perception of reality. It's the way her mind works. And there's nothing I can do about that. I can't fix that. We can't fix other people. And that's just one of those hard truths that we have to accept. But it's very freeing to accept that. I can remember in a meeting that I was in, it was a 12-step program, Al-Anon. I actually got involved in Al-Anon through the advice of a counselor. Because it's not only for family and friends of people addicted to alcohol, it's for people who are in what is described as a dysfunctional relationship. And the thing that I learned kind of set me free. And it was on the first day, and I was so excited. It's the 3 C's, if you're familiar with that. The
I'm
three
not.
C's. Okay. So it's you didn't cause it, you can't control it, and you can't cure it. And I was like, what? I don't have any responsibility to fix my mother or to help her to see me as I am or to hear me when I speak and not twist my words. And wow, I don't have any responsibility to do that. That's wonderful. And also, I don't have the ability to do that because it's just not possible. not with anyone, but especially a narcissist, because they don't think there's anything wrong with the way they act and the way they behave in relationships. They think the problems are always caused by other people, but never by themselves. So
Yeah.
they don't seek therapy.
No, or some type of I don't even know, some type of weird therapy that's going to tell them what they want to hear. I remember my
Mm.
mother going to different therapists and quitting if they told her something she didn't want to hear.
Oh,
And
wow.
yeah, that's not fixing. And it's like doing the work, but not doing the work because she doesn't want to think she's done anything wrong.
Yeah, it sounds like she was seeking validation so she could keep doing what she was
Hmm.
doing.
Yeah, I remember one time she screamed at me in front of my entire soccer team for I lost my clothes at the pool party. And
Mhm.
she apologized to me later that night, and then a few days later she had gone to therapy and she came to me and said, "I talked to my therapist and they told me I should take my apology back." And
Hmm.
I was like, "Hmm." And I was a kid,
Yeah,
so it's like, what is that teaching you, you know?
yeah. What? Yeah, I can't. I would love to explain that one, but I can't. And
Yeah.
in therapy, I had this great therapist. One of them really helped me a lot, really changed a lot of things. And I would sit in therapy and I would talk about the things that were taking place in our relationship and the things that were being said and done. And I would just be spinning my wheels trying to explain them to myself while I was in his presence and he could sort of, give me feedback. And at one point he said, Diane, you're spending an awful lot of time and energy trying to explain your mother's behavior, and it's illogical and it's irrational. And he said, the definition of illogical is that it will never make sense. I was like, oh, wow, you're right. I'm trying to make sense of something that by definition will never make sense. So that was another aha moment. And I felt very freed. It's like the freedom to kind of quit focusing on the relationship and all of the problems. That freedom came in steps with these little
Mhm.
aha insight moments that I had along the way in my healing journey.
Yeah.
So it's possible.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you for sharing that little snippet of your story again with us. I was wondering, how do narcissistic mothers affect their children's future romantic relationships and or just their child's perception of love?
Um, well, because we don't get unconditional love, we don't see that modeled, we don't know how it feels. And so oftentimes when we're in a romantic relationship, um, first of all, we will seek out people that feel familiar to us. So a lot of times we'll seek out individuals who have the same vibe, maybe as our mom, just say it that way. Um, they interact with you in ways that feel familiar and you know what your role is in that relationship. So with my mom, I was very much an emotional caretaker. And so I seemed to attract and be attracted to others who really required that of me. And so that just continued my codependency, just doing everything and anything I could to make somebody else's life feel better and make other people feel better about themselves. And I often to my own detriment, right? I mean, because that's what we codependents do. It's never about us. It's always about other people and what we can do for them. So I found myself in relationships like that. And I think that's pretty typical. Um, and because we have the not good enoughs, when you have the not good enoughs, you accept unacceptable behavior from others, from everybody. And so that's a big part of it too, is you can become a doormat. You don't have boundaries in place. And so if people mistreat you, you kind of feel like it's your fault, it's something you did. And then you start spinning your wheels looking for the things within yourself that you need to fix so that you can please them and appease them. And again, that's more codependency. So it's kind of a vicious cycle until you identify it. And I think that's the key, is becoming aware of the dynamics and the patterns, and then you can take them out and look at them and go, oh, this is what I'm doing. I can't change the other person, but I can see what I'm doing now, and I can change that. And that's also a part of healing.
Mm. Yeah, thank you for sharing more about that. And I was also wondering, is it possible to coexist with a narcissist that has been hurting you basically your entire life?
There's different schools of thought on that. And when it came to be the time for me to make a decision, um, you know, going no contact is a big thing, and it's still highly promoted. And I know for some people that is absolutely what they have to do, and I fully support that. That has got to be very difficult. Um, so you could go no contact, or the other choice was you don't change anything, you just keep trying harder. You keep chasing after the crumbs of affection and trying to be satisfied with that. And so neither of those choices felt good to me. It felt, very black and white. And I like to see all the shades of gray. So for me, I kind of came up with a way of maintaining that relationship, but making it feel better for me. And part of that was not only learning about narcissism and narcissistic traits and how narcissism begins, and a lot of that, just because for me, it was important to understand the basics so I could really understand what was going on and what I was seeing happening in the relationship. And knowing that it wasn't about me, it's about her. And, narcissists make everything about them anyway. So it just stands to reason that, it's not about us. It's not about that there's something unattractive about us or that there's something lacking within us. We might be led to believe those things. And they would like us to believe those things because then they don't have to look at their own behavior and they don't have to change anything about ourselves. And it keeps us focused on appeasing them and pleasing them and doing everything we can to make things better when they're never really going to acknowledge that any of that is working. They're always going to feel like we're not good enough and we're not doing enough. And it's a cycle. It's a cycle. And the only way to break a cycle is to become aware of what's happening, to recognize the patterns, and then to make a change. And it's up to us to make that change and start doing things differently, start perceiving things differently, and break the cycle. And then we have to maintain that break so that the cycle doesn't start up again.
That was some really great advice. Thank you for sharing that with our audience. How can we deal with grief around our damaged childhoods and about the childhood we didn't have, kind of like you mentioned? How can we deal with that grief?
Well, and it's funny that you bring that. I'm glad you brought that up because what I learned in my journey was all of these experiences and things that I was feeling, many of them have a name, right? So when I was describing how my mother would overwrite my memories, overwrite my perceptions, I learned that was called gaslighting, and I learned what gaslighting does. And I often felt I was walking around with a question mark over my head because I was just constantly confused. That's one of the things gaslighting does. And so when we find out things have a name, we can learn to deal with them. So to answer your question, the grief, there's something called narcissism awareness grief. And you enter that after you find out that you are, or you acknowledge that you are in a narcissistic abusive relationship. So there's something called narcissistic abuse syndrome, which probably all of us in this conversation have. The reason we're here is because we have experienced that, and we are starting to recognize that we are in a narcissistic relationship. And so once that happens, and you start to see how someone's narcissistic traits are affecting you, you kind of organically enter into narcissism awareness grief. And that's a term coined by Dr. Christine Hammond. And if you're familiar with the Elizabeth Kubler-Ross stages of grief, I mean, it's very much like that. And you can go through the stages in any order. They are not linear. So you can actually hop around among the stages and you can get stuck in a stage. You can go back to a stage that you had already been in. But the end result is you get to acceptance. That is the final stage where like you're juggling all of these other feelings in these other stages, but eventually you get to acceptance. And once you get to acceptance, that's where the real healing can start because your whole perspective on your relationship changes. There's like a paradigm shift. It's like suddenly you're waking up and you're seeing things as they really are, and it's not scary and it's not threatening. You accept that it is what it is. She's a narcissist. She's not going to change. You don't have any responsibility or the ability to change her. And now that gives you a certain amount of power because narcissists are predictable. And armed with all of this knowledge, you can now start taking control of how your interactions flow. And it's a wonderful thing to learn that. It makes us feel better and it's part of healing. And we can keep that going. So we can stay in that relationship, at least for a while. You know, it might be an okay thing to try all of this out. And if it's still not working for you, then maybe you go no contact after that.
That was some really powerful insight and a really powerful thing to consider and take on in your life or anyone's life.
Yes.
Before we started wrapping up, I wanted to ask you, you have a book that is on this topic that you wrote called Lemon Moms. How did you come to write this book, and what is the biggest takeaway that readers could get from this?
Oh, okay. Well, it's interesting. I never set out to write a book. The idea came to me one morning when I was doing a morning routine that I like to do several times a week. I just take my coffee outside. I get up before my husband and I go out there and I connect with nature. You know, I like to listen to the birds and smell the flowers and feel the wind. And that's all part of reconnecting with my senses, right? Because growing up and having my senses overwritten, it's important to me to connect with my senses and say, yes, I'm smelling this. Yes, I'm seeing that. So that's a daily practice if I can get it in there. And then I do some affirmations. And then I do gratitude. I keep a gratitude list and I'm always adding to it. And it helps me begin the day on a really positive note. So I'm sitting there and I'm just kind of going over my gratitude list. And all of my healing, anyone who's contributed to my healing, you know, the self-help book authors, the people in the support groups, the therapists, whoever helped me along the way, I am still very grateful to them. And it occurred to me that I've learned a lot over the decades. And that when I pass on, I'm going to take all this with me and it's not going to do anybody any good on the other side, you know, because this is meant for the living. So I thought, you know, gee, if I write some of this down, maybe somebody could benefit from that. And if even just one person could benefit, it would be worth, you know, doing. And so that's how the idea was born. And over the next 2 years, I wrote the book. And actually, it's become a series now. So Lemon Moms is the series. And the first book is called Lemon Moms, A Guide to Understand and Survive Maternal Narcissism. And then I have a companion workbook with that, which there are action steps at the end of every chapter in that first book. And the companion workbook expands on those questions and action steps, just takes a little further. And then since affirmations were a big part of my healing arsenal, I wrote the third book in the Lemon Moms series, and it's over 200 affirmations. And I break them down by topic, like affirmations to address gaslighting and affirmations to address betrayal, affirmations to address cognitive dissonance. And I mean, you name it, all of the things that we've experienced with our narcissistic mother, I address in those affirmations.
Thank you so much for using all your knowledge to write those awesome resources. And we are unfortunately running low on time, so let's talk a little bit more about how people can learn more about you. I know you have a great free gift and special offer, and we have buttons for those below. Could you tell us a little bit more about what those are?
So the free gift is one of the chapters out of the first book, and it addresses how to find out if you are dealing, in fact, with narcissism awareness grief. So it's a great chapter to get you started to learn what it is and what it feels like. And then you can identify whether you're starting to experience it or not. So I think it's a good starting point for anybody. And I also have a special offer for that first book. The link below will bring you to the paperback, which is $16.99. And if you use the discount code that I have available, you can have an additional $3 off of that. And the discount code is the word empowered, EMPOWERED, past tense. So use that discount code and get $3 off the book.
Awesome. Thank you so much for offering those awesome resources. And as a reminder to everybody watching or listening, buttons to Diane's free gift and offer are below, and you can click on those to head over and check them out. And then, are there any final insights you'd like to share before we wrap up?
I can't think of anything else right now, but I have really enjoyed being here and our conversation. It was really great. Thank you.
It was awesome talking to you today. And I am so thankful for you sharing your wisdom with us.
Thank you very much.
And I also want to thank our Avaya students for joining us today, and we'll see you again soon. Take care.
Avaya has changed my life.
Avaya has made me the woman I am today.
Avaya is my home.
Avaya is personal freedom.
Avaya is the reason my life continuously improves.
Let everyone in your life know about Avaya.
Everyone needs to know about this amazing company.
Thank you, Avaya, for appearing in my inbox.
What Ike Allen and Andy Anderson have created